When I set a boundary, what do I want to avoid? What do I not want to do when setting a boundary? That's what we're going to talk about here tonight on Man to Man. I love being here with you guys to connect with you. We believe in freedom. We believe in responsibility for ourselves. And the men in this work, the men in Great Men Move Mountains, believe in turning your shoulders toward the world, toward freedom and accomplishment and success. And when you turn your shoulders toward your relationship, you want to bloom a deep love, a love that's going to bloom over time. That's our goal here. It's not just about sex or physicality. It's about emotions and trust and depth and growing together. We want to live our life with freedom, the freedom to have passion, the freedom to commit to ourselves how to have a life of virtue and values, and the freedom to make the most important promises to ourselves as well. So when someone in our life, like our wife, is saying hurtful things to us, if it's over a line for you, if it's crossing a boundary, if you're not sure if it's crossing a boundary, and we can talk about that here tonight on this call. Here's a quote: "Your personal boundaries protect the inner core of your identity and your right to choices." So you have to know who you are, what your values are, what your hills you're willing to die on are, your boundaries. You have to know your inner core to stand up for that, to stand up for your right to choose and have freedom and to move forward. Another quote: "Walls keep everybody out. Boundaries teach them where the door is." Boundaries are not rules to control other people. Boundaries are the doorway of your invitation of how to be within your life. And if someone wants to climb over the walls and not enter through the doorway, or if they want to kick the door down, then we have to decide, well, what do I want to do at that point, if they cross my boundaries? But it's incumbent upon us to know what our boundaries are and to speak up for ourselves. What are personal boundaries? This is from Psych Central Online. Personal boundaries are simply the lines we draw for ourselves in terms of our level of comfort around others. These boundaries may have to do with physical contact, verbal, or our personal space, right? These boundaries typically fall into some categories: emotional well-being, physical space, sexuality, protecting our needs and our sexual safety, workplace, material possessions, or our time. How are we protecting our time or the misuse of our time? So my three big cautions when you set a boundary are not to do these things. Don't be wishy-washy as a man. Be certain. And if you're not certain, that's why you come to the men. That's why you journal. That's why you read. That's why you check in with your own self. What's your existential beliefs around, is this a hill I'm willing to die on? Or is this water under the bridge? Be certain. Don't overly explain. This is a huge mistake men make: defending, explaining themselves. You don't need to explain why you feel something is necessarily over boundary. You can say that it makes you uncomfortable. You can say that you feel it's inappropriate. You can say that it's risky. You can say that it makes you feel nervous, or it makes you feel uneasy or disgusted or angry, or those are all valid reasons. Not to say those are logical. You're not creating a sales pitch here when you're saying a boundary to someone. You're saying what your truth is, your authenticity. So keep it short and simple. And finally, don't look down on her because she's going through this time as best possible. This is along the lines of, try not to take this personally. Try to see her as a wounded little girl on the inside of her as well, that she's doing the best that she can. Now, you may be far down the road from that. You may have spoken up about this many times, and you no longer have empathy for her potentially. But this is also for you. When you hold contempt, you feel contemptuous for someone else. To me, and I don't know if you would agree with this personally, but it erodes sort of my insides. The more I feel anger or resentment toward another person, it's really eroding me. It's not harming them. It's not doing any good either for me. So my third encouragement here is to audit the story that you have in your mind. So be certain, keep it short and simple, and audit the story that you have in your mind. I'm going to share about 1 minute of a Matthew McConaughey interview that I found today. So if you haven't read his book, Green Lights, you got to get the audiobook version because he reads it. And, it's about, he's Matthew McConaughey, right? And amazing actor, fun to listen to. And the story's about his life growing up, the lessons that he's learned and the things that he wants to pass on. It's one that I recommend to men in my one-on-one coaching. So let's watch about 1 minute of this. And this is on boundaries. And I want to open it up after this. So any man that has a boundary, or maybe you feel like a boundary is being crossed and you're not certain, or you're not sure of how to talk about it, or you're uncertain about the story that's going on in your mind, these 3 points, we can go over this tonight. I'm also curious, what What springs forth when you listen to this 1 minute clip of Matthew McConaughey talking about boundaries?
But we want to be accepted. We want approval. We want to get their approval. We feel like as I said, we can maybe mold them in, that maybe we should even sacrifice something of who we are. Maybe I shouldn't be upset with that trait of that person. Maybe that's on me. Okay, that's a good thought. We got to compromise as well in relationships, but the ones that go against, and that word authentic is thrown around, but it's a good word. The ones that go against, we got to have a more bottom line, what we can put up with and what we can't. We're not gonna find, I don't think, love in someone that's just like us. Hell, that's boring. But if we're gonna find someone that, you know what, more bottom line, we're in sync in what we stand for, what we stand against, what we can put up with, what we won't put up with, how we respect ourselves, and how we can respect each other.
So, moral bottom line. He said it very quickly. If we have an agreed upon, a shared moral bottom line, then we can grow together. We can move forward together if we have that baseline, that moral bottom line that we fall back to. So, how does this hit you, gentlemen? Do you feel like you have a moral bottom line shared with your spouse? Do you feel like, when did you come to the place where you no longer shared this bottom line, this moral bottom line with them? How's this hit you? Come on in.
Shifted radically. I mean, I've explained a lot that she had a real big shift. I mean, after the second child was born. But I don't like to attach boundaries to a specific person. I like them to be more attached to my values. And this is something I've had to work on for a long time. So, but if I say, okay, I'm not going to be disrespected because I love myself, or because I respect myself, or, I'm not going to be in a committed relationship if there's infidelity because of it. I must be able to trust the other person that I'm with. If you can attach it to something that is something that you can define as part of your character, or it becomes less about like what you can impose on somebody else, and say, no, this is a part of who I am, how I can define myself, and how I'm going to allow people to treat me, for one, and for two, like, what they can consistently expect from me if it's attached to a value.
Yeah. Well, to your point, it's not attached to an external person, another person. It's who you are. Yeah, I love that. Absolutely. Thanks for getting us started, Hans. Yeah, Patrick, please come on in.
To me, it's about your integrity and your stance. You don't change what you are, and to get an outcome from them, you just state, this is my belief, mine as nut, as they would call it. And it's, man, if you change it, you're not being true to yourself or your own integrity. It's like when the Janice said to me, you can rot in hell. And prior to that, I said, what's the rule? What's the rule in this house? What's always been the rule? You don't lie. Well, I said, I'm not going to lie to my kids. And she didn't know where to go that, but it's always been a consistent rule. I've told the kids, you get into strife, you tell me. If you made a fuck up, you made a fuck up. I'll support you legally if that's what needed, but you do the crime, you do the time. But if you're innocent, I'll sell the house to bloody protect you. And it's framing your boundaries and any future discussions. And even if the relation breaks up, you've held true to yourself.
Yeah, it's very well said. It's exactly. So what about the fear? What about the fear that comes up of what catastrophe could happen? Maybe I'll never see my kids again. Maybe I'll be in financial ruin. What about those pieces, Patrick? What would you say to that?
Well, ultimately, it's your legacy. You don't appease your integrity. If you lose everything, you stood. It's like Martin Luther with, here I stand, I can do nothing else. He fought the church for his beliefs. And what is he remembered for? Not the fact that he lost a fortune, if he did, or lost his kids. He's remembered for standing in his truth. And as a bloke, you've got it, to me, as a bloke, me personally, 71, that's how I want to live. I'll stand in my value. Everything else is transitory.
Yeah, and to your point, you can sleep well at night. You can feel proud of the father that you are, regardless of where your kids are or how much you're seeing them, or any kind of tragedy that could take them away from us. Right. And you can stand in who you are and believe in that and know you're modeling that type of man.
Absolutely. The kids know that I treat mum with respect. I don't denigrate her. I tell them what's going on to a degree. I am focused on the kids and their futures and their grandkids and things like that. The kids know my value and my strength. I sleep very well at night knowing that. I don't denigrate Janice to anybody else. I mean, the most I might denigrate is sometimes on these calls, I might sound a bit pissed off, frustrated, but you have to live in the values. You have to mirror the values. How does my son or my daughter know how to perform in the world with integrity? That's part of being a father, showing that integrity and not showing it, being it. It's not what you say, it's what you do. It's like, what have I done? And I don't want to sound like a hero, but I've given Adam 60 grand so he can get a house, so he can get stable and get well. The money doesn't mean anything if he's dead.
Right.
If you know what I mean.
Yeah.
And the older you get, you realize how much you got to live in your truth. And it should, that sort of ethics, and there should be more of it taught in schools as a grounding. It's how a man operates. And men have honor. And that's what it comes down to, if that makes sense to you.
Absolutely. Yeah. It's very
Men
well
have
said.
to display it. And well, no, you don't have to display it, you have to live it. And one lie told casts doubt on every truth expressed. You've got to be consistent, even if it costs you. Because if you concede to an external, you're screwed, because that external will keep changing.
Yeah, no, this is fantastic, Patrick. We always appreciate you. And I was just imagining Patrick having his own channel and us just listen to him talk. Like, I know every guy here would love it. Patrick, we appreciate you being here.
Anybody wants to talk, I'm happy to help.
Yeah. I'd love for anyone to come in if you have a challenge that you want to bounce off of me or the men about a boundary. Maybe you're not certain about something, or you're not sure how to keep it short and sweet, or you're wondering about the story that's going on in your mind. I'd love for anyone to come in. Yeah, thanks for coming on, Chris. Good to see you. How's life going for you right now?
It's getting better. So I went through a divorce that finalized in March. So I've been just working in the RMM program, kind of like what you're talking about with the boundaries, like solidifying my values, my wants, my beliefs, so those can kind of get established. I think a lot of what I have found to be challenging was just not knowing what I didn't know, right? Like to have the unconscious and
Right.
have visibility and an awakening that just takes time, like especially with how entrenched I've been with a lot of behaviors that were based on survival versus thriving. And what I had utilized to survive childhood no longer serves me as an adult, yet I'm still paying the consequences for that. And I think just a lot of it spends a lot of grieving.
Can you be specific? How do you mean? What coping mechanisms or such would you use?
Creating chaos when there was peace, people pleasing. I found the silent treatment in conflict. I feel guilty about it, not recognizing like that I was having a trauma response. So typically like in a conflict, there's like your fight, flight, or freeze. And then coming out of that, you have hypoarousal, like where an animal would go shake off the adrenaline.
That's right. Yeah.
Would just collapse, into it's not responsiveness, right? And so like it came off, it communicated that I didn't give a shit, that I didn't care about my wife or others, when it was really just a place of coping, like doing the best I could and being really filled with shame and guilt that I couldn't do it another way. Like didn't know that there was another way. So a lot of it is just changing my perception. I think what's been really helpful with this group is being able to have thoughts about my thoughts, being able to observe my emotions, my reactions, be able to step back from those and just go, that's interesting. Lately, it's been really utilizing the hard emotions like anger, fear, sadness, even contempt, like the really hard ones of like, what is this actually trying to teach me? And not running from them, but just saying, okay, what do I need to learn from these emotions? And honestly, like one of the ones I've just really found recently was the amount of the hard issue of me having to say goodbye, like having chapters close, like having to really say goodbye to my marriage. Like I still care about her, I still love her, and yet that person I married no longer exists. She's a different person than who I married. I'm a different person than who she married, and we're different people than when we went through that final divorce process. And so having to say goodbye been really hard and a learning experience, because I've never done this before, right? Like I've never gone through a divorce. It's the first time for me. trying to figure out how to learn from these emotions and this process.
It's very well said, Chris. So what have you learned, let's say recently, or what are you learning now? What's the precipice or the edge for you right now?
Just how much heaviness I've been carrying with me. That my like I felt like I've had to hold on to my anger, my guilt, my sadness to justify to myself that my marriage meant something, that relationship meant something, and then if I just moved past it, it was an indication that I didn't give it my all. And so accepting, and also like a self betrayal, like I'd let myself down. And so really extending myself grace and forgiveness and moving to gratitude where I wouldn't be learning what I'm learning without this soul wrenching experience. And it's so different from where I thought I would be. I mean, just is also different. Like everyone, you grow up learning, like learning about getting married and finding the one and relationship and all that, but nobody teaches you like the dark side of when it goes bad. And I was so terrified, honestly, like this is being vulnerable. I was so terrified. I had one girlfriend break up with me. It was like one of my very first girlfriends. And it was so, I did not even know how to deal with it. I didn't even know that I didn't know how to deal with it. That until this divorce, I had broken up with every other girlfriend because I didn't want to deal with it. Like I preemptively sabotaged relationships so I didn't have to go through this heartache. And yet here it is. So now I guess what I'm learning is like that heaviness I'm carrying of anger, those hard emotions permeated my life and created an atmosphere and environment that was safe, but was so empty of relationships with my kids, with my parents, with my siblings, with my friends, even with myself, that I didn't want to spend time with me. And having like move past those hard things and give myself permission to consider that I can be happy again and that I can have joy again and that I'm okay and I'm worthy of having those feelings, even though my relationship is what it was.
Yeah, Chris, I don't know if you were like me, but feeling that I had to put all my chips into being a sword in the world to go out and make money and to achieve and just provide, and then come home and sterilize myself. That's what you're sterilize myself as best possible so that I don't have complaints or needs or or any kind of requests in life, because that's I should just kick ass as much as possible, come home and just be fucking happy and shut my mouth, is what I felt like a lot of the time. And that came from within me, right? That story from within me. But to your point, you can experience emotion, you can love and move on, you can make mistakes and not be the biggest garbage fire in the world. You can be human and incorporate that into your life.
Yeah, but that's only till now, like that I'm accepting and learning that.
Right.
About this, have you read the Four Agreements?
Sure, yeah.
So like I've been reading that one, and just the concept of like coming out of the dream and being okay that there was a whole bunch of shit that came before me that I didn't have any choice in. Like, so yes, there's culpability and responsibility for myself, but I also have a relief that there were rules in the bullshit and that I can rewrite. Like the book of law it's not God's Bible. It's not God's law. And so it can be changed. Like I don't have to be a fuck up for the rest of my life because I got divorced. Like I can use this and create the rule that actually, no, this is making me a very successful person coming out of this, and just rechanging the whole rule.
Yeah, well, I just grabbed that, copy and pasted real fast, the Four Agreements, for those that haven't read or know. But yeah, this is it's a whole new angle on life. It's a whole new pane of glass. It's a whole new window to look through as to who we are. And when the light is just right, when it's dark outside and light in the room, you can see your reflection on that glass. And we were always there. We were we were always there in the first place, even though we just looked right past ourselves up until we have to have that illuminated. It's illuminated through this tragedy.
Can I ask you one question about this?
Sure.
So I've heard multiple times in the community about mirrors and mirrors and windows, like our relationships, specifically with our romantic relationships, being like the primary mirror showing us who we are, like reflecting back to us, but also like the concept of like the mirror of seeing through to that person. Have you found a balance with that? Or because I'm recognizing in my relationships how much of me is actually coming back, but I'm not sure exactly where there's the balance between seeing them of what's them and also what's being reflected back that's me. That makes sense what I'm asking?
Yeah, it does. And I'm happy to have a longer conversation with you, and we're pretty much out of time here on this call.
Yeah.
But the concept is, am I aware of what's happening in this present moment versus what's coming from my past? And am I aware of my woman coming from this present moment or what's coming from her past? And how do I lead into that or lead through that? Or how do I make sense of that? Again, this is a much longer discussion. This would be a great topic for another time, Chris. But can we differentiate? Can you discern between what am I experiencing now versus what's a tidal wave from the past? Whether it be her blaming you, I'll use some big words here. I don't know your situation, right, Chris? But her blaming, gaslighting, shaming, saying everything's your responsibility, your fault, you weren't good enough. All of these really painful, of course, cutting words that when they're coming out of her mouth from the woman that you love, and she looks like she believes what she's saying, it's really hard. It's really hard to see through that mirror. It's really hard to not take it personally. But these are the challenges that we face with this work, Chris, right? Is to make sense of that and to grow wisdom through that. And it sounds like you are doing that. I appreciate that about you, Chris.
Thanks for the time tonight.
Yeah, absolutely. Come on again. We'd love to have you. That's our time for tonight. If you want to know more about my private groups, you can reach out to me, no strings attached, greatmenmovemountains.com/contact, or you can email me, jeff@greatmenmovemountains.com, and ask about anything that you saw tonight or heard tonight or that you're curious about. Appreciate you guys being here. See you guys next time.